Okay, so you've probably seen the news by now.
Yeah,
It's April 9th, 2025.
big day.
And President Trump has just hit China with a pretty big tariff.
Huge, 125%.
Yeah, 125% tariff on goods coming from China.
Yeah, it's interesting because,
And there's already been some fallout,
yeah, markets in Europe and Asia have already kind of reacted.
some pretty significant drops.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's this real sense of worry about a possible global recession now.
Yeah, that's the big fear, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So for this deep dive,
Right.
we're going to try to understand what could happen because of this tariff
Yeah.
and really just kind of get a better grasp on all of this anxiety around the economy.
Yeah, unpack that a bit.
And to help us do that, we are going to be taking a look at a book by Thomas L. Friedman
Okay.
called The World is Flat.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah, it's a pretty famous one.
And recommended by Bill Gates.
Yeah, so that's kind of a big endorsement.
Absolutely.
So let's see if it can kind of give us some context and some insight into what's going on right now.
Well, the core idea of this book is that globalization has really connected all of our economies together,
Right.
through things like trade and technology.
Right.
And basically, he argues it's created this sort of level playing field,
The
right?
flat world, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. A flat world.
And he even talks about this thing called the Dell theory,
Oh, yeah.
which I think is pretty interesting.
Oh, absolutely. So it's like, imagine a Dell computer
Right.
made with parts from all over the world.
Global supply chain.
Exactly. And the idea is that when production is so spread out like that,
Yeah.
the cost of conflict, like a war or a trade war, becomes so high for everyone involved.
Just bad business.
Yeah, basically it makes conflict a lot less likely because nobody wants to pay that price.
Right. It's like a deterrent.
Exactly.
Okay, so thinking about this Dell theory, right? And we look at these tariffs that are now in place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not just the U.S.'s 125% on China.
No.
China's come back with an 84% tariff of their own.
Yep. Tit for tat.
And then we've got the EU putting in a 25% counter tariff.
It's a bit of a mess.
It does feel like everyone's kind of pulling apart these connections
Yeah.
that Friedman was talking about.
It's like the opposite of the flat world.
Yeah, and it seems like this is having some pretty big economic consequences.
I know, absolutely. And I think one of the things that really jumps out is, people are now saying there's like a 60% chance of a recession.
That's a pretty scary number.
Oh, yeah. And Citigroup has actually lowered their GDP forecast for China down to 4.2%.
Wow.
So that's a pretty significant drop.
Yeah, that's not good.
And it's not just, numbers on a screen either.
Right, this is real world stuff.
Yeah, we're seeing European markets down over 2% already.
And even more dramatically,
Yeah.
South Korea's Kospi index has officially entered a bear market,
Uh-huh.
which means it's down 20% or more from its recent high.
Yeah, that's a big sign that people are getting really nervous.
Yeah, and it's not just investors who are concerned.
No.
I mean, we're hearing world leaders like Macron and Sanchez expressing some pretty serious worries about the potential damage of a full-blown trade war.
And they're not just talking either.
Right.
I mean, we've seen something like $6 trillion wiped off of global stock markets since April 2nd.
That's just a few days ago.
It's a massive amount of money.
Yeah, and it really kind of puts into perspective the scale of concern here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going back to Friedman's ideas about these interconnected supply chains,
Right.
it seems like these tariffs could really mess things up.
Yeah, that could throw a real wrench in the works.
Can you give us an example of how this could actually impact people in their everyday lives?
Sure. So, you know how everyone loves their iPhones?
Who doesn't?
Well, some analysts are saying that with all these disruptions to the global supply chain and these new tariffs,
Yeah.
the price of an iPhone could potentially skyrocket to something like $2,300.
That's more than a laptop.
It's crazy, right?
It's more than double what they cost now.
Yeah, and it really shows you how, these interconnected systems can lead to some pretty unexpected price increases.
Right, because everything's so dependent on everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just iPhones either.
Right, this could affect all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's even this estimate going around that a full-blown trade war could cost the global economy like $100 billion every year.
100 billion with a B.
That's billion with a B.
Wow.
So the stakes are pretty high.
Yeah, for sure. And it really makes you understand why someone like Bill Gates was so interested in the world is flat.
Right.
Back in 2010, he actually recommended this book because he said it helped him to understand these really complex global challenges that we're facing.
And it's so relevant now.
Right. It feels like Friedman was kind of predicting some of this stuff.
Yeah, in a way.
I mean, you see people online talking about like a global economic nuclear winter.
Yeah, and some pretty serious warnings from economists like Bill Ackman.
So it's not just like doom and gloom internet stuff.
Yeah. No, this is real concern from people who really understand these things.
Right. It seems like what Bill Gates saw in Friedman's work.
Yeah.
And what's really relevant today is this idea that we need global cooperation
Right.
to deal with these complex economic issues.
Absolutely. You can't just go it alone.
And it seems like this tariff situation is a good example of what can happen.
Yeah, for sure. It throws that need for cooperation into really sharp relief.
And this is something that is directly relevant to you.
Absolutely.
It affects the economic trends that we've talked about before.
Right.
It has implications for global issues we've discussed.
Like in episodes 45 and 42.
Exactly. So this isn't just some abstract thing.
No, it affects all of us.
So I think the big takeaway here is that these actions, these tariffs and counter tariffs, they're a pretty serious challenge to the kind of globally connected world that Friedman was talking about.
Yeah, that flat world idea.
And it seems like the potential consequences could be really far-reaching.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it raises a really big question.
Yeah.
What if we are moving away from this flat world?
Right.
What new kinds of global connections might emerge?
Oh, that's a good one.
And how would businesses and people need to adapt to that?
That's something to think about.
Definitely something to ponder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some food for thought.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.